So Joe,
Hey Jerry.
full schedule tonight, right? Is confirmation tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I think Robin and Carter over next wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Yep. There's full.
You're back to full schedule.
Yeah. Back to normal. I guess you could say. Yeah.
Whatever. Hey, whatever normal.
Whatever normal is. That's exactly right. Sorry, I'm just turning off my readers.
And I told them.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's good to see you all. Hope you had a good. Christmas and New Year's. We're in Genesis 43. Anybody need sheets from?
You got a spare there.
Oh, I think I do.
I'll give it back. Yeah, just go ahead and pass them around. Got really close to the camera there. Sorry about that. Did I miss a spot shaving?
Okay, yeah.
Oh.
And then behind you.
Yeah. These are Genesis 43. These are from a couple weeks ago. It's not a new one. If you had them from last time, you should be good. But just in case, it's been a little bit. It's been a minute.
43.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have the one you need.
So I believe where we're at in Genesis 43 is we've got this situation now where the brothers came back from Egypt. Simeon is left behind because they're being accused of spying. So they make their way back home. They tell Jacob of the situation that they need to bring Benjamin along, otherwise Simeon's not going to see the light of day again, essentially. Jacob goes into his dramatic situation, doesn't want to go back, doesn't think they should go back, and then all of a sudden, starting in verse 43, we need to go back, right? We're hungry, there's no more food. The brothers kindly remind their father that, hey, we want to, but remember, Benjamin's got to come with. To which Jacob replies that, after some lamenting, that Benjamin can go, and what will be will be. In other words, it's in God's hands. That's kind of it. And so I think essentially where we left off was in verse 14. Correct. Leaving it in God's hands is kind of where that's all at. Yeah, that's the best place for it, right? And that's the piece of this. And just to back up, just one more thing, just because I want to make sure, as we ramp into 44, we're going to get to the kind of the end of the test from Joseph. So it's been a couple weeks just to remind you all, Joseph here and what he's trying to accomplish again is seeing that change, right, in his brothers. Have they actually changed? Are they different people or are they the same? And so everything that's going on here from Joseph to them is very much to see that point, right? Is this real? Is this happening? It's not to punish them. It's not to get revenge. It's to honestly see if there's change. And so we're just kind of living into Joseph's test here, if you will. And as we get into 44, we see one last one and kind of it wrapping up. So last week, not last week, but the last time we met, did I get a chance to read to you, I think from Chad Bird, correct? Mm-hmm. Did that sound familiar?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Perfect. So then we will start in verse 15. And it said, so the men took this present, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So just a reminder, Jacob sent a whole bunch of stuff with them to try to appease this character in Egypt, right? He had tried that before with Esau. I'm going to send a whole bunch of stuff. That seemed to work out okay. It's got to work here again too, right? With this guy from Egypt. Maybe he'll be nicer if we send a whole bunch of stuff. So that's the present that's being referenced there in verse 15. So he took the present, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose, went down to Egypt, and stood before Joseph. And so what's interesting in this piece, just kind of as a quick note, they're actually referred to as men here, right? Previously, they've been kind of known as brothers or whatever it might be, which it doesn't always have its best connotations, but actually referring to them as men. And we're going to see these title changes also progress right? Signifying some significant changes or showing some significant changes in the brothers' attitude, who they are, what they're about. And so it may seem like a small thing to all of a sudden say men, but it's actually probably more closer to where they are than they ever have been up until this point in Genesis. And so it's just a good catch to note that these title changes, they are meaningful. They're not just, today I feel like men versus brothers or something like that, right, as Moses is writing this out. So then we get into the celebration. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready for the men are to dine with me at noon." In other words, we're going to eat at noon. The man did as Joseph told him and brought the men to Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. And they said, "It is because of the money which was replaced in our sacks the first time that we were brought in, so that he may assault us and fall upon us, to make us servants and seize our donkeys." So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house and spoke with him at the door of the house and said, "Psst." No, I'm just kidding. And said, "Oh, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food, and when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it again with us, and we have brought other money down with us to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks." So we're going to just stop there for a second, okay? So keeping in mind, Joseph sees Benjamin with them. He runs to the steward of the house, tells him, "Bring the men into the house. We're going to have a party." Nowhere in there is that ever mentioned to the brothers, right? So when they're brought in, they have no idea. That's the context. That's the situation. They're just being told, "Hey, Joseph wants to see you." Not Joseph, but this guy wants to bring you into his house, okay? So it's a little triggering, I guess you could say, for them in terms of what may happen to them. But when you talk about having this celebration, Joseph sees Benjamin and he wants to have this celebration. Why? Because his brother is actually still alive, right? They hadn't killed him. They hadn't done off with him. Joseph's worst fears in all of this were that something bad was going to happen to Benjamin and even to Jacob himself. And so he actually sees that that's not the case. It's just not the situation. And we're going to see some of these great reversals, is a great way to talk about them, as we finish up in this account in chapter 43 and 44. The thought process where something bad must have happened, and now all of a sudden the complete opposite is true, right? And the result and the emotion that comes from that. And so the celebration is there because Benjamin is okay. Joseph's brother, his biological brother, his blood relative, I guess you could say, however you want to talk about that, is very much alive and well, and it's cause for celebration. Okay. So then they get brought into Joseph's house, and also along with this, you got to remember the last time they were brought to Joseph's house, they were given the, what do you call that, the 9th degree or whatever that is, where they, what is that called? Is it the 2nd degree? What's that for? Third degree, something. They were given a degree, okay? And it wasn't in biology. That's what we know, right? It was an interrogation. How about that? But that's what they have in their mind, right? They don't know this celebration is coming. Last time they were there, they lost a brother in the deal, right? Simeon was bound and put away. What's going to happen this time? This guy doesn't seem to be happy, especially the reality that they might have stolen something even though they really didn't. And so that just Joseph's house is not the place they want to be, right? It's a place that's terrifying to them for the past, but also what they've allegedly done, even though they haven't done it. Yeah.
Pastor, I might have missed the numbers here, but did Joseph even know he had a brother, Benjamin?
Yeah. Yep.
He was alive?
Yeah, he was alive for that. Yep. Benjamin was pretty young, but yeah, he was alive. Yep. Good question. Yeah, they all were aware of others' existence. Yep, you bet. So then we see the uncharacteristic move here. Towards the end of that section in verses 19 through 22, they actually went up to the steward of the house and they returned the money. It's not in character with what we've seen from them so far. And even if you notice, they tell the truth about it, right? They don't even try to concoct a story as to how it might have gotten in there, right? Dog ate their homework kind of concept. No, it just, we don't know how it got there, but it got there, and here's this, and we also brought money with us to buy again, just in case you're wondering if we're trying to take advantage of anything, right? So it's a turnaround for them. It's not just the honesty in saying that they had the money, but it's also not coming up with a scheme to try to justify why they have the money. They just own it. Just say, yeah, this is what it is. This is what we've done. We don't know how it happened, but this is what happened.
But it's also out of fear, right?
Oh.
Of the consequences of what they might think
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
they did.
Yeah, but it also shows, I mean, there's been lots of times where fear could be driving a lot of the things they do, and they've schemed in that fear, right?
Yeah.
In this one, it's just honest to goodness honesty. Like, it's just blatant. You think about Jacob and how many times he schemed, and essentially out of fear, right? It runs in the family. You talk about slaughtering the entire town, right? Because of how they treated their sister. There's a fear behind that. There's a revenge factor, but there's very much a fear of what might happen to their sister, right? Or what has happened to their sister. And so there's been instances where they've used that fear to manipulate and scheme, and in this instance, it's just their backs are against the wall. There's no other place to go except honesty. And we've talked about that with Joseph, and his plan here is that there's that intentionality in putting them up against a wall because there's no other place to go. Either they're going to be honest and show a real change, or they're going to continue down the path that they've always been on. So there is no question left as to where that's coming from. Even if it is fear, it's still honest. Yeah. But yes, you can't lose sight of that fear. They are deathly afraid. Deathly afraid. Any other questions on that? All right, so they talk to the steward of the house. They say, hey, by the way, got this money, don't know how it got there, we're bringing it back, but we also brought some more to buy some more food. And then the steward of the house says, peace to you, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. Okay? And so essentially, with that, what was that?
How did he know that?
About God? Yeah, that's because Joseph's been talking. Yeah. You got to remember, we talked about this a little bit with Joseph in terms of his faith and the concern of being brought into an Egyptian household, especially an Egyptian household that has ties to the religious practices of the day. We've seen that not go well for a lot of the family in Genesis, right? But Joseph has actually flipped that up on its head and is doing evangelism, for lack of a better way of saying it, and sharing who God is, right? And so the steward of the house, this guy who runs the house and is high up in authority, even he knows about who God is. And in that way, it's even just a little, like, wink and nod that if the brothers probably weren't so deathly afraid, they might have gone, well, how do you know about that God, right? Like, it should have been something that would have gone, wait a minute, there's something with this, and they just didn't catch it at all, which I wouldn't either if I was in their shoes. I'd just be like, good, I'm not dead. Okay, this is a good place to be. All right, no, we're good.
But it must have been a surprising statement to them.
100%.
Your God
Yep,
has taken care of it.
yep,
What did he know? The note in my Bible says the steward spoke better than he knew.
yes, yep. Yeah, no, it's true, Nate. Just
So
in
like
case
you
you
say,
can't.
evangelism was part of Joseph's theme.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and even as we get into chapter 44, as we talk about, your God has done this, right? That comes from Joseph, that language itself. Because when he reveals himself to the brothers, spoiler alert, by the way, he does, right? He tells them who he is. He basically tells them that it's okay. That God has meant this for good, essentially. In other words, he's saying, our God, in that instance, has worked this out for his plan. And that's essentially what the steward of the house is getting at here, is your God's got this covered. And so even just the concept that the steward of the house is conveying here is very much shown to be a Joseph origin, right? Like that's where it came from, that perspective, that thought process. It only came from Joseph, right? As he talked to his family, as he talked to his household about God and his situation. There's no question that he talked about his situation with his family. I don't know that he talked about it with everybody in the household, because there is a danger in that, right? He is an Egyptian, and not everybody knows where this Egyptian came from. And if the city or the people would have known that there was a foreigner leading this, it may have led to other consequences, right? We talked about that with them eating food, right? Egyptians didn't eat food with foreigners, right? They just didn't. And so all of a sudden to hear that a foreigner is distributing the food by which you eat probably could have ended really poorly for a lot of people, right? So it's not to say Joseph told everybody, but I'm sure in his family they were very much well aware of what's going on, and even the leaders in his family, and how his story became a place of telling about God's work in his life. Yeah.
But Pharaoh, wouldn't Pharaoh have, when he promoted him to where he was,
Yep.
I mean, his word had to spread, wouldn't you think?
Well, I don't know how much, well, I mean, just you think about political figures in general, right? How much do you actually know about all the details in their life, right? You know,
Yeah.
you know a lot of the things that are out there, but you don't know everything. And in this instance, Pharaoh is very much a religious guy, right? We know that because he's like, listen, nobody else could do this unless God was with him, essentially, was the point of Joseph interpreting the dreams. We talked about how desperate Pharaoh was. I'm sure in Pharaoh's mind there's room for compromise if he knew Joseph's entire story and putting that place in there, because he was desperate. He also could see God's hand in it, right? And so, yeah, what am I to do in that?
And
But,
ate God's hands.
yeah.
He could, I mean, as a Pharaoh,
Yep.
and they believed in different idols, and maybe,
But there was even there's some historical records, Ross, that and I don't want to get this wrong, but there's historical records of pharaohs who are probably in this time frame, going from polytheism to monotheism, right? In the one God. Now I don't know that that means necessarily the God of Israel, right?
Yeah.
But that's a significant change for Egypt to go from polytheism to monotheism, right? Now, of course, as we saw throughout history, and you see all of the hieroglyphics and all the things, polytheism reigned and ruled in ancient Egypt, even after they made the switch to monotheism. But there's some element there of, okay, there is one God somewhere, right? And it's kind of that not certain faith in the God of Israel, but at least some impact of the God of Israel being seen in that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But yeah, Joseph was not afraid to talk about his faith. And you just see these instances here, like with the steward of the house, where that shows through, and even the language that the steward uses is very much reflective of Joseph's language that we'll see later on. Yeah. So then, go ahead.
Is the steward saying that they thought that they didn't get the money, but they actually did, but God put more money back into their bag?
What they're saying is, and this is the small connection to Jesus that you can make in here, right? And I think it's taking an inch and running a mile, but it's a mile worth running, in my opinion. It's saying that your God paid the price for your trouble. Okay? That's what he's saying. Right? So if you're going to take it, like I said, it's an inch, but you can run it a mile, and I think it's a mile worth running, as we've seen some of these things. Basically, he's saying, your God has paid for your sin. Okay? Yep. That's the gist. Yep. Great question. Yep. right, so verse 24. And when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, and when he had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. Ooh, boy, that's a mouthful to chew on there. Sorry about that. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with them, and bowed down to him to the ground. And he inquired about their welfare, and said, Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? They said, Your servant, our father, is well, he is still alive. And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son. Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother. And he sought a place to weep, and he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. And controlling himself, he said, Serve the food. They served him by himself, and them by themselves. And the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. Okay? So some of them got to eat at Sizzler, and some ate at Old Country Buffet, is what I see in that. So we have, Joseph's concern here. You can see the two things coming through again. He's got a concern for his dad. Is he alive? Is he well? How's he doing? And it seems like maybe a repetitive question from the first time, but you got to remember, it's a journey to go from here to Israel or where they're at and then back again, right? So a good amount of time has passed since they left. So it's a fair question to ask. Is he still alive from when you left? I know he's a little bit older, essentially, so is he still there? Is he alive and kicking, right? And then seeing his brother makes it very, very emotional for him. And then in verse 28, we see here again the dream coming true, bowing down to Joseph in verse 26 and verse 28. So over and over again, it is as he has said. Joseph is living out those dreams in this portion of the text. So then they get this meal put together. They're going to celebrate it. It sounds like it's lunch. Seems like a heavy lunch if it's 5 times the amount, but that's what it is. They're going to have this lunch together, and Joseph could not eat with his brothers because, again, there's that separation. And in that way, it shows the reality for people that Joseph is an Egyptian. He's not a Hebrew. He's an Egyptian for all intents and purposes. So if he were to eat with the Hebrews, it would have caused great offense. And this kind of goes into that conversation we were having just a little bit ago, right? I'm sure there were some people who knew his story, but not everybody, because those were deeply held beliefs, attitudes of the Egyptians, and to break that would have been offensive and really put the whole thing at risk. We're going to see in chapter 44, we kind of get a timeline in there in the sense that it's about probably year 1 or 2 of the famine 7 years, right, at this point. And so it's just beginning, essentially, this whole food distribution piece, the struggles, the people's famine, the hunger, all those things. For Joseph to compromise that now and to eat with his brothers or do something that might, put the lid off the whole thing would have been absolutely reckless and dangerous. And it also speaks to Joseph's perspective on what matters most. And we'll talk about that in chapter 44. Just from his perspective, what is the most important thing in this? While family is important, it seems very much living out God's calling is what the most important thing is to Joseph here. Okay? So then Joseph keeps kind of tipping his hand a little bit. He sits them in order from oldest to youngest. And they all wonder how he knew that, right? sorry, the pictures in my head that come from this meal are just incredible, right? Like they're just sitting there and they're, one line, top to bottom, and they're going, huh, man, he's just really good at this, right? Like he just really knows what he's doing. Should have been in the carnival, right? Guessing weights and ages and all those things. Like it's just kind of funny to me how he did that, just to kind of give some more winks and nods to things. And then we have Benjamin, who's given a ton of food. And on one hand, we see that, okay, yeah, he's the favorite, right? Part of the brotherhood, all those things. Joseph is following in the steps of his father, right? But going back and remembering some of the attitudes and things of the brothers, what was one of the attitudes they showed when Joseph got his coat? It was jealousy, right? And so if I give Benjamin 5 times the amount of food as everybody else, are they going to respond the same way? Are they going to hate them more? And it also helps that alcohol was involved, okay? Because if you really want to get an honest answer from somebody at times, having some alcohol is not the worst thing in the world, right? People get relaxed, a little bit more loose in their tongue. And so again, it seems like it's favoritism or playing into that, but it's also Joseph getting to the heart of, have they really changed? Are they still the same old brothers who got jealous with my coat of many colors, or are they changed? Are they different? And has that change been reflected to Benjamin as they've taken care of him? Okay. All right. Any questions about chapter 43 before we move into 44?
The whole birth order thing was, I know that's important to the Hebrew people, but was it important to the Egyptians?
No, it was just kind of a wink and a nod to them to say, hey, I know it should have been, again, one of those things that would have tipped them off to go, how does this guy know? Right? There's been these like tipping of the hand moments where, okay, how do they know about the God of Israel? How do they know about our birth order? Right? It should have just been those things where they go, there's something to this. Now, I don't know that I would have ever gotten to the point, oh yeah, that's the brother we supposedly lost, how many years ago. But it's those moments where you're just going, okay, yeah, there's something to that. So it wasn't so much that it was important to put them in their birth order. It was just kind of a tease, if you will. Yeah. Oh, and one more thing before I forget. We talked about this a little bit, I think this last time and times before. Whenever Joseph removes himself in the story to go weep or whatever it might be, it's usually an affirmation of a behavior change in the brothers, right? And so when we see this in chapter 43, Joseph goes in his chambers and weeps, right? It comes directly after he hears that Jacob is okay, and he sees Benjamin and that he's okay, right? So in other words, the brothers haven't done the things that they have done in the past. And so whenever that happens, we'll see that in 44. We've seen that a little bit in 42 and 43. Joseph has these emotional moments, and the more pronounced the weeping, it seems, the more pronounced the changes that he sees in his brothers. Okay, so we'll see that especially in chapter 44. But just kind of putting that back in there because that's an important piece to seeing this transformation in the brothers in the story too. Everybody got one? Chapter 44? Onward and upward. Okay? So then he commanded the steward of his house, fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, with his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph told him. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. They had gone only a short distance from the city. Now Joseph said to his steward, up, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is it not from this that my Lord drinks, meaning the cup, and by this that he practices divination? You have done evil in doing this. When he overtook them, he spoke to them these words. They said to him, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money that we found in the mouths of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Whichever of your servants is found with it shall die, and we also will be my Lord's servants. He said, Let it be as you say, he who is found with it shall be my servant, and the rest of you shall be innocent. Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack, and he searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. So, keeping in mind the end of chapter 43, you got to remember that when these texts were written, there were not chapter breaks. Okay, those things came in later as part of writing and just kind of formatting and whatever it might be. So it's one long continuous text. And so in chapter 43, we see this ending with Benjamin getting more than the rest of his brothers, right? That opportunity to see if they've really changed, if they would be jealous. Well, here's another opportunity, okay? So basically, Joseph says, I'm going to put this in Benjamin's sack, right? It seems like they're okay with Benjamin, that they haven't gotten jealous with him, but here will be an opportunity for them to act out if they really have changed. So if they haven't changed, they're going to sell Benjamin out so fast, and they're going to head home without any worries about it at all, okay? But if they have changed, then all of a sudden they're going to stay with Benjamin. They're going to fight for him. They're going to do those things, right? And so you look at this coming right after that, that feast, if you will, at noontime. It's an opportunity to see if their jealousy was still there, but also he gave them an opportunity to act out of that jealousy if they wanted to. Okay? If they really hadn't changed, and he knew that they wouldn't. If Benjamin came back by himself, they knew, or he would know then that they really hadn't changed. Okay? So that's what it's looking at there. It's just not an opportunity to see if there's jealousy. It's an opportunity for the brothers to act out of their jealousy if it's really there. Okay?
What's the significance of tearing of the clothes?
Just deep distress. Great mourning. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just a signal to where they actually are. For Joseph, they'd be like, nah, okay, take him. We don't care. Because if you notice what he says here, and I'm getting ahead a little bit, but he says basically that the steward of the house says, we'll take the one captive who has this, and the rest of you can go free. Right? So there's your ticket out. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. We're just going to take this Benjamin character. But that's not what they choose to do. Right? Instead, it just shows their great distress, and again, that there has been some change. Yeah.
Pastor?
Yeah.
It seems like they had no choice but to stay with Benjamin, because if they had gone home, their father would have disowned them.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Benjamin was a favorite.
Right. But they were already in that status anyways. Right? Like when we talked last time about Jacob's mourning, not like, maybe it was last time, or the time before, but Jacob mourning the fact that he would have to send Benjamin, right? I lost my last son, or whatever that verbiage was. Well, you got 10 others, man. Like, and you're not even acknowledging Simeon at all in this. So the brothers of old, I don't think would have cared, because they came back straight up and lied to their dad's face about Joseph and what happened to him, right? Again, easily could have come up with a story about what happened to Benjamin. Same thing even. They could have taken his robe and found an animal, slaughtered it, put the blood on it, gone home and said, Dad, guess what? You'll never believe this, right? That same goat that got Joseph, he got Benjamin too, right? So they definitely did have the opportunity if they hadn't changed, right? If they didn't understand. They would have concocted some story to get rid of him, to make it seem like it was just the way it was. But this is, and we'll see more of this, Rich, as we walk through more of the text. It's not, they are making a conscientious choice to stay. They are not doing that out of obligation, which is a huge change in behavior for the brothers. Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? Good question. All right, so backing up then into verses 3 through 6, the steward is sent after the brothers to put the plan in motion. A couple of things to notice on that. One, The divination that's being discussed there, Joseph did not practice divination as it's understood in spirituality, right? And he had the ability to interpret dreams. So it's not to say that Joseph was doing evil things or bad things, right? It's part of the Egypt facade. It's part of the character, if you will, of Joseph being in Egypt. He has given credit many times over and over again in past sections to his gifts coming from God and being from God himself, right? So it's not like Joseph has gotten into the dark arts or something like that along the line. This is just part of the Egyptian facade. This is part of the Egyptian character, okay? And then if you notice in that, the steward tells the brothers the exact words that Joseph told the steward to tell them, okay? He doesn't deviate from that at all. Tells them the exact words. Okay? Any changes to that might have made the whole thing fall apart, right? Now you'd expect that from a steward of the house because that's kind of the job, right? Your job is not to interpret on your own what the boss is telling you, right? Your job is to word for word carry out what the boss told you and to share that with others. Okay? So then the steward of the house catches up to the brothers. They're just beside themselves, but they're also confident that this hasn't happened, right? Surely it can't happen a second time, that the money is missing, all those things. They're so confident, in fact, that they say what? If they find it, and whoever's bag they find it in, they should die. Don't lead with that, okay? Just don't. It never goes well. Because what is that like? What's the familiarity in that? Right? Do you remember Jacob and Rachel with the household gods? What did he tell Laban? He said, listen, I don't have your household gods. And if you find them here, put them to death. Whoops.
Oops.
Right? Like, just never lead with it, okay? It's not a good thing to lead with. But you see some of the family history following through that's just, for whatever reason, a natural trait here to automatically go to death if something is stolen. I don't understand it. There's nothing that tells me like, well, it's a cultural thing or whatever it is. But for sure, in their confidence that surely it couldn't happen again, they very much decided that death would be the fate, like Jacob did with Rachel, even though he didn't know. He had no idea.
Or is it more of a propensity simply for lying? And so that, if I add something big on the end of it, you can kill me if I'm not telling the truth. I mean, how often don't we, like when we just talk with one another or say, I swear to God I'm telling the truth.
Right.
It's just like, just say, I'm telling the truth.
Right.
Instead of having to bring God into it. But it's like they add the emphasis, the coloring.
Yeah.
Doubling down.
To prove or to supposedly show that they really are telling the truth.
Yeah, and I think you'd say that in an instance where they knew that they were lying, but they didn't know.
Well,
Both
right.
Jacob
Yeah,
and
I
the
agree.
brothers. Yeah.
But I mean compared to like say the first time.
Yeah, well, like with Jacob, he didn't know Rachel had stolen the household gods. Like that was an unknown. He really did not know that because,
That's true.
especially with Rachel, he would not have done death as the thing for Rachel. He'd have been like, well, maybe we send them to
Try
like
out
a
on
cruise or something. Right? Like, we just kind of put them on exile to Jamaica or something, right? Like would have given her a really lenient sentence versus death. But to your point, Denise, we do that, right? When we're
Yeah.
trying to hide behind a
Yeah.
lie, we I think Ross, you used the phrase "double down."
Yeah.
We try to make it so large that the person backs down and isn't going to want to carry that out if it's true, right? But no, I think in these instances, both of them, the brothers and Jacob, they didn't know, and so they didn't have anything to hide because they didn't know they were hiding anything. So I'm not sure again why there's that thought process to instantly go to death in both of those instances, but it's kind of where it is. But no, you're right. We We 100% swear on my mother's grave, right? Like, I swear it didn't happen. Yep. Especially when you're younger. I don't know if I ever used that phrase, but no, Mom, I'm not lying. I'm telling you the truth, right? Like, yeah. I hear that one in my household quite a bit. Yeah.
Is that with the cookie jar?
Yeah. No, it's usually, did you really hit your brother? No, I swear I didn't hit him. Where'd the mark come from? I don't know. Yeah, that may have been yesterday, so that was good. That's good. It's good. Yeah. Boys are fun. All right, so then, so they throw that out as the option, right? If they find it, die. But the actual terms that the steward lays out, he said, you know, fine, here's what we're going to do. If you find it somewhere, they're going to be a servant, right? And the rest of you will be set free. And as we talked about a little bit, you know, Jerry, I think Jerry, right? We were talking about that? Or maybe Ross, I can't remember, I apologize. You know, essentially, that's their ticket out. So if they haven't changed, boy, we're innocent, we can go. Great. I'm out, right? Like, if they were the brothers of old, there's our way out. We just got to go find a goat, right? Call it a day. Can you leave his robe behind? We're going to need that too, right? But instead, you know, it's very different. But yeah, basically, the steward dangles the carrot, right? He says, if the person is caught with it, they'll become a servant. I'll take him back to Egypt. The rest of you can go. And kind of sit and wait to see if the trap ever gets sprung, if you will. Okay. So then we get Benjamin and his brothers. And we see the reaction there, that they tear their clothes. They respond in a way that reflects change in their behavior. And even if you look in verse 14, we didn't quite get to that verse when I was reading that. It said, when Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell before him to the ground. So they went with Benjamin. They didn't say, well, okay, steward, go ahead and take him and we'll catch up or something, or we'll leave him here. They weren't going to leave him. They went with him. Okay? They absolutely 100% were behind Benjamin all the way back to Egypt. And note again how they're noticed, or how they're talked about here. Judah and his brothers. You know, you think about why Judah, right? Why is he called out here? Well, if you remember back before they left, Judah was the one who told Jacob, if anything was to happen to Benjamin, you could take it out on my family, right? And so now, as the story gets told, we kind of see the main character come forward for this section, which is Judah. He's going to speak. He's going to be the one to take charge, because that's the oath he made, that I'm the one in charge who's going to make sure Benjamin gets back to where he needs to be, okay? So it's no longer just the men or the brothers or whatever, it's Judah and the brothers. Be a great name for a band, but. So then in verse 14, we'll keep reading there. It says, when Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. Surprise, surprise. They fell before him to the ground. Joseph said to them, what deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can indeed practice divination? And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak, or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also, in whose hand the cup has been found. It would have been a lot easier just to say Benjamin. I'm just saying, didn't have to use 10 words when one word will do. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. Okay? So Judah comes up and he speaks on behalf of the family. And if you notice, he doesn't understand how, he doesn't understand why, but he very much takes the responsibility for it. It's not like he knows, well, yeah, Benjamin, right after the dinner was done, put the thing in his sack and we just didn't know it or whatever it was. It got there again. We don't know how, but we're going to take responsibility for it. And if you look there, the pronouns he uses are we, right? What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? How can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he who is in it. So there is this unifying piece here, and I'm not going to read all about Benjamin again, that's too long. But there's that unifying piece. They're not just individual brothers anymore, they're all in it together. So it's kind of Three Musketeers style, right? All for one and one for all kind of concept. They're not separating, they're not even really laying the blame at Benjamin's feet. They're saying we're all responsible. We're all going to take the blame. Again, enormous change in that concept. Enormous change in the brothers to be able to, thank you very much, to process and think that way, but to also speak to that. Because again, what is the ramification? Right? If they are all guilty, they all become servants and Jacob has no kids. Right? That's it. There are no sons. So taking the blame here is huge. It's an enormous thing. And it speaks to the change that the brothers have. So then Joseph gives them the way out again, right? Just like the steward did. Listen, I'll just take the one who had the cup in his sack, and the rest of you can go, right? Just go ahead, just go. I'll just keep the one here. And testing, right? Seeing if the brothers take it. But also, it really is a win-win for Joseph in that situation. Because if they say, yeah, we're going to leave Benjamin with you, well, guess what? Joseph can take care of Benjamin the rest of his life. And he knows he's in good health. He'll be taken care of, comforted, all those things. Benjamin will be in good shape. But if they say no, right, we want Benjamin to stay with us, we're going to stay with him, however that goes, well, it's a win there too because it shows that the brothers have changed. Right? So there really is no loss for Joseph here in offering this offer, right? If they say, no, take Benjamin, great. I can take care of Benjamin the rest of his days. If they say, no, we're sticking around with Benjamin, we're in this together, great. That means you guys actually have changed. And then I know for sure that Benjamin and even Jacob will be taken care of all their days. So it's not a bad place to be for Joseph. Any questions about that at all?
Well, so Joseph is favoring his youngest brother.
Right.
Rather than any other of his brothers. Or
Correct.
his father.
Correct. Yeah, if there's a priority list, I mean, there is Jacob high up there, but Benjamin is most likely higher, yeah, in this scenario.
Because that was his father's favorite, or?
They're blood brothers, right? So it's his actual brother from the same mother,
Oh.
right? Yeah, so they had the same mother.
That's the- okay.
Yeah, that's the connection.
That's
Yep,
okay.
that's the connection.
So the others weren't?
Different mothers. Yep, different mothers. So there's Leah, Rachel, and then the two concubines or the two wives. What do you call it? Wife servants, the maid servants. And so there was 4 mothers between the 12 brothers overall.
So
Yep.
these two are the only full.
These 2 are the ones that belong to Rachel,
Okay.
and then there were some that belonged to Leah, a couple that belonged to. Their names are escaping me. What was it? Milcah or Milpah? Zilpah, something like that, yeah. So that they kind of get scattered otherwise. But in the brothers, there are those. You're okay. No worries.
Sorry,
No, you're good. No
I don't
worries.
know what to do.
Fell. Bye.
It's all
I
good.
don't know what to do.
No, please.
Oh,
It's all good. If it's Jacob calling, tell him his son's on the way. It's fine.
That's a good one.
Yeah, he'll be back shortly.
He's
But-
just out of the office.
They're in a little pickle. They'll get out of it. Oh, okay.
sorry.
No. Just, all right, so here's they're in a little bit of a pickle, and get ready for the joke. It's not a big deal. Okay? There it is. There it is.
You've been waiting for that one for a
I
while.
have. That one has been sitting on a tee, waiting to get swung at for years, Ross. Years. No. No. So as you talk about the family line, there are brothers who are connected the same way that Benjamin and Joseph are connected. They are brothers from the same mother, right? They are all brothers together, but there's just groups that are from the same mother. Yeah, and especially with Rachel being the favorite of Jacob, then the sons would naturally become the favorites too, sticking together. And also, I think it's a fair statement to say that the other 10 brothers very much didn't really like Leah's or Rachel's sons, right? With Joseph and Benjamin. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. There's nothing really stated in Scripture, but it could just simply be how Jacob treated their moms, right? You think about how Jacob treated Leah, which is awful, just terrible. There would be some natural resentment in that, not just towards Jacob, but then also towards Rachel's sons too. So, yeah.
But he still had 4 sons by her.
Yeah, still had 4 sons by her. Yeah, that didn't change much. Nope, didn't change
Old
much.
Sister Wives episode.
Yeah, it is a Sister Wives episode. Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
But
Yep.
Jacob, Jacob's view of her feeling toward Joseph is very much like Joseph having that feeling for Benjamin.
Yeah, very much so.
It's the same
Yep.
setup.
Yep.
Youngest,
Yeah,
youngest.
Yep. Oh, 100%. Like that's the reality, right? It's very much the family line, right? And even as we get to the end, I think it's after Joseph reveals himself, and they send the brothers back to Jacob. They send him back with all this great stuff, but Benjamin still gets like 5 sets of clothes as opposed to everybody else's 3 or 2, right? So there's still that piece of, he and I are tight, right? Like that's kind of the concept.
The code of many numbers.
Yeah, the code of, that's exactly right. Yeah. Oh, that's good. So then in the next section here, verses 18 through 29, Judah just basically is bringing Joseph up to speed, okay? So he says there, then Judah went up to him and said, so this is after Joseph gives them the out, right? Gives them the opportunity to leave. So Judah says, "Oh, my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants," so then Joseph said to your servants, right, as Judah is retelling the story, "bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. Then you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see my face again. When we went back to your servant my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother goes with us, then we will go down. For we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant my father said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in evil to Sheol." I'll just finish it out here. "Now therefore, as soon as I come to you, to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father." Okay?
And this is Judah speaking.
This is Judah speaking.
Yeah.
Yep. Judah is speaking here the whole way. Yep. So it is a ton of pronouns trying to figure out who is who in this instance. But essentially, Judah is reminding Joseph of their first interaction. So remember you said this? Great. We went home, told our dad when he said to come back. This is what dad said, that basically it's not good. We shouldn't go back. So we didn't come back. And then we ran out of food. And then we came back because we told our dad. And then he said, fine, we'll send Benjamin along. And this is where we are now. Right? And if this is where we are, then we're going to stay, send Benjamin home so our dad doesn't die, because they're intertwined that way, and let me stay in his place, is kind of the gist of what the narrative is. Okay? So that's kind of what he's getting at with Joseph, just telling the story, all of those things. And when you look at what he does in bringing him up to speed, what Judah shows is a concern both for Benjamin and Jacob, right?
Yeah.
Which is not there in previous chapters. Okay? And as speaking for the brothers, you can say then that care goes all the way through the rest of the brothers as well. That there is that care for Jacob and Benjamin. That Benjamin would live, and because Benjamin would live, Jacob too would also live. And I think that was the best way, as you're reading this, you kind of go, how do you describe that relationship? We just spent a couple minutes talking about how favored Benjamin is to Jacob and all those things. Judah sums that up great. That essentially, like, Benjamin's life is Jacob's life. If you separate that, if you take one of the lives like Benjamin's, Jacob's will end. That's all there is to it. And there's nothing that would question that as we look at the text previous and how upset and sorrowful he was over Joseph, as upset and sorrowful as he was with Benjamin being the condition on to returning to Egypt. Right there, for everything that I see, I would believe that Jacob would actually die if Benjamin didn't come over the horizon again. They are just that intertwined and that connected, however that is. So it just seems to be the best way to describing that whole relationship. Okay? Yeah.
I got a stretch.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
You can get up,
Maybe-
walk around. No,
maybe
wait.
a real stretch.
Yeah.
So when I read this, he's gonna die unless the sun returns.
Yep.
So I think of, Christmas week, the song of Simeon
Mm-hmm.
in the temple. Simeon had been, this separation,
Mm-hmm.
but once he sees the Son of God,
Mm-hmm.
Lord, now let my servant depart in peace.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
is that a stretch or is there,
well,
is there a similarity there?
there is definitely some. Here's your dime store word. The Christological connections here
Yeah.
in that portion of text.
I see it
Specific.
as Simeon, as the old man, as same as Jacob.
Yeah. Well, we'll think of it this way, right? So Judah, right? The tribe of Judah. Which one does Jesus come from? The tribe of Judah. What is Judah trying to do here? Substitute. He is saying, take my life and give Benjamin his.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
That's the substitution.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you want to talk about the Christ connection that's happening there, absolutely. That for sure is that space. That basically Judah is saying, I will go into imprisonment. I will take the punishment that is for Benjamin, and you let Benjamin go scot-free. So there's for sure where that piece is. And yeah, I think you can make some connections to that, Jerry, in terms of like the father and the peace that comes from knowing he's home, right? And even just that comfort that it's all going to be okay now. Because, that's really at the heart of Simeon's thing. Like, this is great. I'm good. I'm really good
It was
now.
good after that.
Yeah, it was good after that. And when Benjamin comes home and sees, as Jacob sees Benjamin and all those things, life is very good. Right? There's no question about that. But no, Judah's request here is to be a substitute, right? To take the place of Benjamin, of someone else who deserves something else, and take that on for himself. So there's your Jesus moment in Genesis again.
There you go. Yep.
Okay? Lots of fun. And I think we'll stop it there, because
You're
it's
gonna leave
always
us-
good to stop with
You're
Jesus.
gonna leave us hanging?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I got to keep it coming back next week. If I just tell you how it all ends, you're not going to come back.
It's all good.
It's all good.
It's like those, what was it? There was a TV show I watched as a kid, and there was this big cliffhanger into the summer, right? And I was watching something like just a couple of years ago on that episode. It was like a behind the scenes thing. And the actor in that show said he was driving around during the summer and he pulled up at a stoplight and there was a car that pulled up next to him and they rolled down their window and they said, "How does the story end?" And he said, "I can't tell you." And he goes, "You ruined our summer." It's like, don't go that far. Just come back next week, right? It'll be good. We'll figure it all out then.
Was it Dallas?
Was it Dallas? No, it wasn't Dallas. It wasn't Dallas. No, we shot JR. Yeah. It was not Dallas. It was not Dallas. Yeah, no, it's good. Good. Well, let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you again for time in your word today. Thank you for the opportunity to dive into the change of the brothers, but also those glimpses of you and how Christ comes into those times, but also into the places of substitution. Lord, just help us to see those today. Help us to see you taking our place and then living into that freedom that you have so wonderfully given us. We pray this all in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Thank you.
Pastor, do you have the word for the week readings at all?